The evening began like many others, calm on the surface and busy underneath, in a high-end restaurant known for its soft lighting and quiet elegance. The place was designed to make people feel important the moment they walked in. Warm golden lights reflected off polished wooden floors, and the gentle clink of glasses mixed with low conversations. People came here to celebrate deals, anniversaries, and moments they believed mattered. For most of the guests, it was just another expensive dinner. For the staff, it was another long shift. Among the guests sat a man whose presence did not demand attention, yet quietly held it. He wore simple but expensive clothes, the kind that did not need logos to show value. His posture was relaxed, his voice rarely raised, and his movements controlled. Those who recognized him knew he had more money than most people in the room could imagine, but he did not behave like someone trying to prove anything. He looked around with observant eyes, as if he enjoyed watching people more than being watched. The restaurant staff moved quickly and carefully, trained to be polite, efficient, and invisible at the same time. Among them was a young waitress working her shift with steady focus. She carried plates with care, memorized orders without writing them down, and smiled politely at every table. To the guests, she was just another server doing her job. No one asked about her life, her past, or her dreams. In places like this, people were seen only for the role they played. She had been working since late afternoon, her feet already aching from hours of standing and walking. Still, she did not complain. She had learned long ago that showing tiredness never changed the workload. Her attention stayed sharp, moving between tables, refilling glasses, clearing plates, and responding quickly when someone raised a hand. She knew the rhythm of the restaurant well. She knew when the rush would come and when there would be a brief calm. In one corner of the restaurant stood a grand piano. It was black, polished, and beautiful, placed near a large window where city lights could be seen at night. Most guests thought it was just part of the decor. Sometimes, on special nights, a professional pianist would be invited to play soft background music. But on this evening, the piano was silent. Its lid was closed, and no one paid it much attention. To most people, it was just furniture, but not to the waitress. Each time she passed by that corner, her eyes drifted toward the piano for just a moment. It was not obvious. No one would notice unless they were watching closely. But there was something in her expression, a quiet pull, as if the piano was calling to a part of her she kept hidden. She never stopped walking, never slowed down, but her gaze lingered just long enough to suggest a memory. The billionaire noticed this. He had been observing the room for some time, not out of boredom, but curiosity. He liked to watch how people behaved when they thought no one important was looking. He noticed how some guests spoke loudly to feel powerful, while others sat silently, trying to belong. When the waitress passed his table, he noticed her professionalism, but also that brief glance toward the piano. At first, he thought nothing of it. Then he saw it again. There was something different about the way she looked at it. It was not casual interest. It was familiarity. The evening continued. Orders were served. Wine was poured. Conversations rose and fell like waves. The waitress continued her work, her smile polite but reserved. She did not try to charm anyone. She did not rush unnecessarily. She simply did her job well. Yet something about her calm focus stood out in a room full of people trying to impress. At one point, the restaurant grew quieter as the dinner rush slowed. Some guests had left, others were finishing dessert. The background music played softly through hidden speakers. The piano remained untouched. The billionaire leaned back slightly in his chair, his attention returning to the waitress as she stood near the service station, waiting for the next task. From a distance, she looked ordinary. No dramatic expressions, no loud laughter, no attempt to stand out. But there was a sense of discipline in the way she stood, the way she held herself. It was the kind of discipline that usually came from years of practice, not just work experience. He had seen it before in athletes, musicians, and people who had trained themselves to do something well. The billionaire wondered about her story, not in a dramatic way but with simple curiosity. Life had taught him that talent often appeared where people least expected it. Over the years, he had met brilliant minds working ordinary jobs, people whose circumstances had redirected their paths. He had learned never to judge ability by appearance or title. The waitress was unaware of his thoughts. To her, the night was moving slowly. She was counting the hours until her shift ended. Her mind drifted briefly, as it sometimes did during quiet moments. She thought about the past, about nights when music filled small rooms, about sounds that once made her feel alive. She quickly pulled herself back to the present. Dreams did not pay rent. Reality required focus. A couple at a nearby table asked for the bill. She moved quickly, her training taking over. She smiled, thanked them, and wished them a good night. As they stood up and left, the space near the piano became more visible. The lights reflected softly on its surface. For a brief second, she stopped walking. Just for a breath. She did not touch it. She did not open it. She only looked. That was when the billionaire knew his first impression was right. This was not curiosity. This was connection. The restaurant manager walked by, checking tables, ensuring everything was in order. The waitress straightened her posture slightly, returning fully to her role. She had learned to keep personal feelings separate from work. In places like this, professionalism mattered more than personality. The billionaire picked up his glass, swirling the liquid slowly, his mind working quietly. He had come to the restaurant for a peaceful dinner, maybe a short escape from meetings and decisions. He had not expected to notice anything unusual. Yet here he was, intrigued by a small detail most people would miss. He thought about how many people walked past opportunities every day, how many talents stayed hidden because life demanded something else. He had been fortunate. Others were not. Still, fortune alone did not explain the look he had seen in her eyes. That look came from experience, not wishful thinking. The waitress returned to his table to check if everything was satisfactory. Her voice was calm and respectful. She did not recognize him, or if she did not treat him differently. To her, he was just another guest. That alone impressed him. He thanked her politely. Their exchange was brief and professional. She turned to leave, but once again, her eyes flicked toward the piano as she passed. This time, the billionaire smiled faintly to himself. The night was setting the stage, though no one realized it yet. What seemed like an ordinary evening, filled with routine and quiet moments, was slowly turning into something else. A silent piano waited in the corner. A waitress carried more than plates and menus, and a man with sharp eyes sat watching, sensing that something unexpected was close. For now, everything looked normal. The lights stayed soft. The music stayed low. The restaurant breathed in its usual rhythm. But beneath the calm surface, a story was beginning. One that would soon remind everyone in that room that talent does not disappear just because life gets in the way. The next part of the evening unfolded quietly, almost unnoticed, but it carried a shift that would soon matter. The restaurant manager announced a short break for the staff rotation, giving a few minutes of calm before the late-night guests arrived. Plates were cleared, tables wiped down, and the air felt lighter, as if the room itself was taking a breath. The waitress stepped back toward the service area, stretching her fingers gently. Long hours had trained her body to hide discomfort, but small habits like this helped her stay steady. She looked toward the piano again, this time without realizing it. The room was quieter now, and the soft lights made the black surface of the instrument glow. It looked less like decoration and more like something waiting. Across the room, the billionaire noticed her pause. He did not interrupt or stare openly. He simply observed, the way someone does when they sense something meaningful but do not yet understand it. He had learned that rushing moments often ruin them. Some things revealed themselves only when given space. He finished his drink slowly and signaled for another, not because he needed it, but because he did not want to leave just yet. Something held his attention here, something beyond the food or the setting. He felt the familiar pull of curiosity, the same feeling that had guided many of his most important decisions in life. The waitress returned to her duties, unaware of the quiet attention following her movements. A new table arrived, and she greeted them warmly, guiding them to their seats. Her voice was gentle, professional, and calm. She listened carefully as they spoke, repeating their orders to make sure nothing was missed. Every detail mattered to her. Mistakes were costly not just in tips but in pride. When she walked away, one of the guests commented on how polite she was. Another nodded without much thought. For them, the interaction ended there. For the billionaire, it added another piece to a growing picture. He had met many people who were loud about their abilities, eager to be seen and praised. He had also met those who stayed quiet, carrying more depth than they ever showed. Experience had taught him that the second group often held the greatest surprises. The waitress belonged to that group. As the night moved forward, he found small reasons to keep her nearby, asking for water, then a napkin, then a recommendation from the menu, nothing demanding or rude. Each time, she responded with the same steady tone, never rushed, never annoyed. She spoke clearly, choosing her words carefully, as if she respected the value of being understood. At one point, he asked her how long she had been working there. It was a simple question the kind guests asked all the time. She answered politely, mentioning the number of years without adding detail. She did not complain or exaggerate. It was clear she did not expect sympathy or praise. Work was work. That was all. He then asked if the restaurant still hosted live music. Her eyes flicked to the piano before she could stop herself. It was quick, almost invisible, but he saw it. She cleared her throat softly and explained that it happened on special occasions, usually planned in advance. Her voice remained even, but something in it softened when she mentioned music. The billionaire leaned forward slightly, resting his arm on the table. He asked if she enjoyed music. This time, she hesitated for half a second. Not long enough to be rude, but long enough to reveal thought. Then she smiled, smaller than before, more personal, and said yes, very much. That answer opened a small door. He did not push further right away. Instead, he let the conversation drift back to safe topics. The food, the atmosphere, the city lights outside the window. He respected boundaries. He understood that people often carried stories they were not ready to share with strangers, especially in places where power and money changed the balance of conversation. Still, the seed had been planted. Later, when the restaurant grew quieter again, he noticed her standing near the piano once more. This time, she was alone, her back turned slightly toward the room. Her shoulders relaxed just a bit, as if she had stepped out of character for a moment. Her hand hovered near the edge of the piano, not touching it, just close enough to feel its presence. He stood up slowly and walked toward her, careful not to startle her. His footsteps were soft on the polished floor. When she noticed him, she straightened immediately, stepping back into her professional posture. Her face showed surprise, followed quickly by concern, as if she worried she had done something wrong. He reassured her with a calm smile and told her she was not in trouble. His voice was steady, warm, without authority or demand. That alone eased her slightly. She nodded, waiting for him to speak. He gestured gently toward the piano and asked if she played. It was a direct question, but not an aggressive one. There was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. Still, the question landed heavily. She felt it in her chest, like an old memory being tapped awake. She did not answer right away. Years of careful silence pressed against her thoughts. Admitting something like that felt risky. People often laughed, doubted, or dismissed. Others made promises they did not keep. She had learned to protect that part of herself by keeping it quiet. She finally said that she used to play a long time ago. Her words were chosen carefully, shaped to lower expectations. She did not claim skill or talent, just experience once. The billionaire nodded, accepting her answer without challenge. He told her he found it interesting how people ended up far from their early passions. He spoke about life in general, not about her specifically, which made it easier for her to listen without feeling exposed. She found herself responding more than she planned to. She mentioned how life took turns, how responsibilities arrived before dreams were ready. She did not go into detail, but the truth sat between her words. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix anything. The conversation felt different from others she had with guests. There was no flirting, no power play, no hidden expectation. It felt like two people speaking honestly for a moment, even though they barely knew each other. A voice from the service area called her name, reminding her that work was waiting. She apologized and stepped away, returning to her duties. As she walked back, her heart beat a little faster than usual, not from fear, but from the strange feeling of being seen. The billionaire returned to his table, his thoughts turning over slowly. He had not planned to say much, but the exchange confirmed what he suspected. There was history there. Not a hobby picked up casually, but something deeper, something trained and practiced. He recognized the signs. He had seen them in artists, athletes, and innovators before they found their moment. The rest of the guests remained unaware of what was quietly forming. To them, it was still just another night out. Conversations flowed, laughter rose, glasses clinked. No one noticed the invisible line now connecting the piano, the waitress, and the man watching with interest. As the night moved closer to its end, the restaurant grew even calmer. Some lights dimmed slightly. Chairs scraped softly as people prepared to leave. The piano stood silent, patient, holding decades of sound within it. The waitress finished another round of service and checked the time. Her shift was almost over. Relief mixed with exhaustion. She looked forward to going home, resting her feet, letting the day fade. She did not expect anything more from the night. Life had taught her not to expect surprises. But the billionaire had not left. He waited not because he wanted attention, but because timing mattered. He believed that moments should feel natural, not forced. When the right moment came, it would be clear. As she passed his table one last time, he thanked her sincerely for her service. He told her she had made the evening pleasant. His words were simple but genuine. She smiled, a real smile this time, and thanked him in return. As she walked away, she felt something unfamiliar. Not hope exactly, but curiosity. She wondered why that brief conversation lingered in her mind. She wondered why the piano seemed louder in its silence than before. Neither of them knew exactly what would come next, but both sensed that the evening had shifted from ordinary into something else. A chance encounter had opened a door, quietly and gently, and sometimes that was all it took for a hidden story to begin moving toward the light. The moment that changed everything did not arrive loudly or suddenly. It came quietly, wrapped in casual words and a situation that seemed harmless on the surface. The restaurant was settling into its late-night calm when the billionaire finally acted on the thought that had been growing in his mind all evening. He had watched enough to be certain of one thing. The waitress was not just someone who liked music. There was history there, practice, discipline, a connection shaped by time. He knew the signs because he had once devoted years of his own life to mastering something before the world ever noticed him. That kind of focus left marks on a person, even when they tried to hide it. He stood up from his table and walked toward the piano, stopping a short distance away. He did not touch it. He did not open it. He simply looked at it, then turned back toward the waitress, who was clearing a nearby table. When she noticed him standing there, her steps slowed slightly. He asked, in a calm and almost playful tone, if anyone was allowed to play the piano when it was not in use. The question caught her off guard. She had expected another polite thank you or perhaps a request. This felt different. She explained that usually only scheduled musicians were allowed, but sometimes, with permission, staff could play very simple tunes for guests, mostly background sounds, nothing serious. He smiled faintly and said he was glad to hear that. Then he said something that made her pause completely. He suggested that she play something simple, just a basic tune. Nothing long, nothing fancy, only a few notes if she felt comfortable. The words landed heavier than they sounded. Around them, the restaurant was quiet but not empty. A few guests remained, talking softly. The manager was nearby, checking reservations. This was not a private moment. This was public enough to feel risky. Her first instinct was to say no. Years of experience told her that moments like this often led to embarrassment. People liked the idea of hidden talent more than the reality of it. They enjoyed watching someone try and fail. She had learned to protect herself by avoiding situations where expectations could turn into judgment. She shook her head gently and said she was just a beginner, that it had been years, that she might make mistakes. The billionaire did not push back immediately. He nodded as if he expected that response. He said that mistakes were fine. He was not asking for anything impressive. He mentioned a simple children's tune, the kind taught in early lessons, something that did not require skill. A few nearby guests overheard the exchange. One of them smiled, clearly amused by the idea. Another raised an eyebrow, curious. No one seemed hostile, but the attention was enough to make her heart beat faster. The restaurant manager noticed what was happening and walked over. There was a brief exchange. The billionaire spoke calmly, reassuringly, explaining that it would only be a short moment and that it might add a warm touch to the evening. The manager hesitated, then agreed, trusting that nothing inappropriate would happen. All eyes slowly turned toward the piano. The waitress felt the room shift, not dramatically, but enough to be felt. This was no longer just a conversation. This was a decision point. She could step back, laugh it off, and return to work. No one would blame her. Or she could sit down and play, knowing that once she touched those keys, there was no hiding. She took a slow breath. She told herself that it was only a few notes, that she would keep it simple, that she would stop if her hands shook too much. She reminded herself that this was just a piano, just sound, just something she once knew well. She walked toward the piano. The movement felt strange, like stepping into a memory rather than across a floor. Each step pulled her away from the role she had been playing all evening and closer to a version of herself she rarely allowed to surface. She sat down carefully on the bench. The piano felt solid beneath her fingers as she lifted the lid. The familiar smell of polished wood and old strings reached her, bringing back years of quiet rooms and long hours of practice. The room grew silent. She placed her hands on the keys, resting them there for a moment. They trembled slightly, but the shape was still right. Muscle memory, long asleep, began to wake. She started with the simple tune he had mentioned. The first notes were soft, clean, correct. At first, it sounded exactly like what she had promised. Basic, careful, unremarkable. A few guests smiled politely, as if this was already enough. The billionaire listened closely, his face calm, unreadable. Then something shifted. It was not a sudden change. It was subtle, a slight variation in timing, a deeper touch on certain keys. The simple tune began to breathe. It gained warmth, emotion, shape. The waitress was no longer thinking about the room. As she played, the noise of the restaurant faded. The clink of glasses disappeared. Conversations stopped. There was only sound and memory. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, guided by instinct rather than thought. She stayed close to the original tune, but she let it grow. Small changes, gentle layers, nothing flashy, nothing loud, just depth. People noticed. One guest leaned forward slightly. Another stopped mid-sentence. The manager froze where he stood. This was not what anyone expected from a simple request. The billionaire felt his chest tighten slightly, not from surprise alone, but recognition. This was not someone remembering a few lessons. This was someone who had lived with music. Someone who understood it, respected it, shaped it. The tune expanded naturally, like a story unfolding. The waitress did not look up. Her eyes stayed on the keys, her expression calm but focused. The nervousness faded, replaced by something steady and familiar. She was home. The sound filled the space without overwhelming it. It did not demand attention. It earned it. Each note felt intentional, placed with care. The piano responded to her touch as if it had been waiting for her specifically. When she reached the final note, she let it linger just long enough before lifting her hands. Silence followed. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. The kind that settles when people realize they have witnessed something special. No one clapped immediately. It took a second for the room to return to itself. Then applause rose, gentle at first, then fuller. Not loud cheers, but sincere appreciation. The waitress stood up slowly, suddenly aware again of where she was. Her heart raced. She felt exposed, unsure how to react. She smiled awkwardly and stepped back, ready to return to her duties. The billionaire spoke then, breaking the moment with quiet respect. He thanked her, not casually but sincerely. He told her that what she had played was beautiful. She tried to downplay it, saying it was nothing special, that it had been a long time. Her voice shook slightly now that the music had ended. He did not argue. He simply said that skill like that did not disappear. It waited. The guests slowly returned to their conversations, but the atmosphere had changed. There was warmth in the room now, a shared experience connecting strangers for a brief moment. The waitress returned to work, her movements automatic. Inside, her thoughts spun. She had not planned for this. She had not prepared herself for the feelings that playing again would bring. Old dreams stirred, along with old pain. The billionaire returned to his table, but his mind stayed with the piano. He knew he had seen something rare, not just talent, but resilience, the kind built by years of silence and responsibility. As the night drew closer to its end, he knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a truth coming back into the light. And the waitress, though she did not yet realize it, had taken the first step toward being seen for who she truly was, not just what life had required her to become. She did not realize how quiet the room had become until she lifted her hands from the piano and heard nothing at all. For a brief moment, it felt as if time had stopped. The sound she had just created still seemed to hang in the air, soft but powerful, like a memory refusing to fade. Then the applause came, gentle and respectful, not loud or dramatic, but real. It surprised her more than the music itself. She stood up from the bench slowly, her legs feeling slightly weak. The piano bench felt different now, almost sacred, as if it belonged to a version of her life she had locked away. She stepped back, unsure where to look. Her face warmed, and she felt exposed in a way she had not felt in years. Playing had always been private for her. Doing it in front of others felt like opening a door she had spent a long time keeping shut. The guests smiled at her as she walked away from the piano. Some nodded in appreciation. One older couple whispered to each other, still caught in the moment. A few people clapped again softly, as if they did not want the feeling to end. She smiled politely, the same smile she used while working, but inside, her thoughts were racing. She returned to the service area and picked up a tray, even though there was nothing on it. She needed something to hold, something familiar. Her hands were steady now, but her heart was not. The music had stirred emotions she did not expect. Pride, sadness, relief, and longing all mixed together, making it hard to focus. Across the room, the billionaire watched her closely. He noticed the way she moved now, slightly different than before. There was a lightness in her steps, but also tension. He recognized that feeling well. It was what happened when someone touched a part of themselves they had buried. Could be freeing, but it could also be painful. He did not rush toward her. He knew better than to overwhelm a moment like this. Instead, he waited, allowing the room to slowly return to its normal rhythm. Guests resumed conversations, though quieter than before. The piano stood still again, its brief voice now part of the night's memory. The restaurant manager approached the waitress, concern and curiosity mixed on his face. He asked if she was all right, if everything was okay. She nodded quickly and apologized, worried she might have crossed a line. He shook his head and told her she had done well, that guests seemed pleased. His approval surprised her. She was not used to being praised for anything beyond good service. Still, the manager reminded her gently to return to her duties. The night was not over yet. She thanked him and moved back onto the floor, slipping once more into her role. Plates needed clearing. Bills needed bringing. Life, as always, continued. But something inside her had shifted. Every time she passed the piano now, she felt it differently. It no longer felt like a distant reminder. It felt alive. She avoided looking at it too long, afraid of what might surface again if she did. The billionaire finished his meal quietly. He did not distract her with more questions or requests. Instead, he observed how she handled herself after the performance. She did not seek attention. She did not tell anyone it was her. She worked just as she had before, perhaps even more carefully. That humility spoke louder than the music itself. When the restaurant thinned out again, he finally stood and approached her once more. This time, she noticed him immediately. Her shoulders tensed slightly, unsure of what he might say. Compliments made her uncomfortable. Expectations made her nervous. He thanked her again, this time more personally. He said her playing had changed the mood of the entire room. He did not exaggerate or flatter. He spoke simply, as if stating a fact. She replied quietly, saying she was glad people enjoyed it. She avoided meeting his eyes for too long, afraid he might see too much there. He asked her where she learned to play like that. The question felt heavier than before. It reached deeper. She hesitated, then gave a short answer. She said she had studied for years when she was younger. Life happened. Things changed. She did not go into detail. She did not need to. He listened carefully, not interrupting, not pushing. When she finished, he nodded slowly. He told her that discipline like that did not come from talent alone. Came from commitment. He said not everyone could sit at a piano and make people feel something. She did not know how to respond to that. She simply said thank you. There was a pause between them, not awkward, but thoughtful. Around them, staff cleaned tables and prepared for closing. The night was winding down. He then asked her a question she did not expect. He asked if she ever thought about playing again, seriously. Her first instinct was to laugh it off. She almost did. But the question stayed with her. She thought about the years she had spent working, surviving, putting responsibility before passion. She thought about the way her hands had moved so naturally just minutes ago, as if they remembered who they were meant to be. She answered honestly. She said she thought about it sometimes, but thinking and doing were different things. Life did not always leave room for dreams. He did not disagree. Instead, he said something that surprised her. He said that sometimes life waited for someone else to notice what we no longer believed in ourselves. She looked at him then, really looked. There was no pity in his expression, no superiority, just understanding. Before leaving, he asked her name. She gave it. He introduced himself only by his first name, nothing more. He did not mention his wealth or status. To her, he was just a man who listened. He left a generous tip, far more than expected. When she saw it later, it made her pause. Not because of the money, but because it felt like acknowledgement, not charity. After her shift ended, she changed into her regular clothes and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights glowed around her. Cars passing by, people walking with their own stories and worries. Everything looked the same as it always had, yet she felt different. As she walked home, the music replayed in her mind. The sound of the piano, the feeling of the keys beneath her fingers, the silence afterward. She realized how much she had missed that part of herself, even though she rarely allowed herself to admit it. At home, she sat quietly, staring at the wall for a long time. She did not turn on the television. She did not check her phone. She simply sat with her thoughts. Fear crept in, followed by doubt. What if that moment had been a mistake? What if it raised hopes that could never be fulfilled? But alongside the fear was something else. A small, steady feeling she had not felt in years. Possibility. Across the city, the billionaire sat alone as well, reflecting on the evening. He had attended countless events, heard countless performances, and met countless talented people. Yet this moment stayed with him. Perhaps because it was unexpected. Perhaps because it reminded him of how easily the world overlooked quiet strength. He knew that challenging her to play had been a risk. Could have gone wrong. But it had not. And now a question lingered in his mind. What responsibility came with recognizing talent when you saw it? The piano had spoken that night, but more importantly, someone had been heard. Part 4 of the story closed not with a decision but with a shift. Two lives had crossed in a simple, honest way, and neither would leave that evening unchanged. The days that followed did not feel dramatic from the outside, but inside her, everything felt unsettled. Life returned to its usual routine on the surface. She woke up early, prepared simple meals, and went to work just as she always had. The restaurant looked the same. The tables were arranged neatly. The lights glowed softly in the evening. Guests came and went without noticing anything different. But for her, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every time she walked past the piano, her chest tightened slightly. It was no longer just an object in the room. It had become a reminder of who she was, of who she had been, of who she might still be. She avoided it at first, afraid that even looking at it would open emotions she did not know how to handle. She had spent years learning how to stay steady, how to survive without expecting more from life. One short performance had shaken that balance. The billionaire did not return immediately. Part of her wondered if he ever would. Another part of her felt relief at the thought that maybe it had all been a one-time moment, something beautiful but brief. Moments like that were easier to live with when they stayed in the past. Still, she found herself thinking about his words. Not the praise, but the calm certainty in his voice. The way he spoke as if her ability was not surprising, as if it made sense. That stayed with her more than anything else. At night, when the apartment was quiet, she placed her hands on the table and imagined the keys beneath her fingers. Her muscles remembered the shapes, the spacing, the reach. She wondered how much she had lost and how much was still there. She wondered if it was too late to reclaim something she had set aside for so long. A few evenings later, the restaurant was busier than usual. A group of guests had booked a large section for a celebration. The staff moved quickly, voices overlapping, orders flying back and forth. She focused on her tasks, grateful for the distraction. Busy nights left little room for thought. That was when she saw him again. He entered quietly, dressed simply as before, blending in easily. If someone did not know who he was, they would not look twice. But she recognized him immediately. Her heart skipped, then steadied. She told herself to stay calm. He was just a guest. He took a table near the piano. She did not approach him right away. Other guests needed attention, and she used the work as a shield. Still, she could feel his presence, not in a heavy way, but like a question waiting to be asked. When she finally came to his table, he greeted her with the same gentle tone. There was no surprise on his face, no expectation. He asked how she had been. It was a simple question, but it felt different from the usual polite exchanges she had with customers. She answered honestly but briefly. She said she was doing well, working a lot, the usual. He nodded and did not push further. He ordered his meal and thanked her. The conversation could have ended there. But as she turned to leave, he added something softly. He said he had been thinking about the music she played. She paused, then turned back. She did not know why, but she felt that this moment mattered. He told her that what she played had stayed with him longer than he expected. He said it was rare to hear something so genuine in a place where most sounds were planned and polished. He said it reminded him that some of the most powerful moments came without warning. She listened quietly, unsure how to respond. Compliments still made her uncomfortable, but this felt less like praise and more like reflection. He then asked if she had played again since that night. She shook her head slowly. She said she had not. There was no excuse in her voice, just honesty. He did not seem disappointed. Instead, he asked if she would like to. The question was simple, but it carried weight. Not now, he clarified. Not in front of guests. Just sometime when the restaurant was empty, if permission could be arranged. No audience. No pressure. The idea surprised her. She had expected another challenge, another public moment. This felt different, safer, more respectful. She told him she would think about it. He smiled and said that was all he asked. That night, after her shift ended, she stayed behind for a few minutes. The restaurant was quiet, chairs stacked, lights dimmed. The piano sat in its usual place, silent. She stood there, looking at it, thinking about his offer. She did not sit down. Not yet. But she did not walk away immediately either. Over the next few days, she noticed small changes in herself. She paid closer attention to sounds. Music on the radio felt richer. Simple melodies carried more meaning. She caught herself tapping rhythms on the counter, humming softly while cleaning. Felt natural, like breathing. The billionaire returned again later that week. This time, the restaurant was nearly empty when he arrived. The manager recognized him and greeted him politely. After a short conversation, the manager approached the waitress and asked if she would be comfortable playing for a few minutes after closing. There was no pressure in his tone, only an option. Her heart raced, but she said yes. After the last guest left and the doors were locked, the staff finished cleaning and quietly stepped away. The lights were lowered further, leaving the piano softly illuminated. The manager stayed nearby, but at a respectful distance. She approached the piano slowly and sat down. This time, there was no audience, no whispers, no curious eyes, just silence. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. She played longer this time. Not a single tune, but a flow of music shaped by memory and emotion. She did not rush. She did not hold back. The piano responded fully, filling the empty room with sound that felt both old and new. The billionaire listened from a chair nearby, not watching her hands, but feeling the music. He closed his eyes at times, letting the sound carry him. This was not a performance. It was a conversation between her and the instrument. When she finished, she felt calmer than she had in years. The tension she carried daily seemed lighter, as if some weight had been shared. He thanked her quietly and said something that stayed with her. He said that music like that deserved space to grow. She did not know what that meant yet. She did not ask. Instead, she went home that night feeling something close to peace. Part 5 of her story was not about a big decision or a dramatic change. It was about recognition, about allowing herself to touch something real again, about understanding that talent did not disappear just because it was ignored. It waited, and now it had been invited back into her life. The change did not happen all at once. There was no sudden announcement, no dramatic promise, and no life-altering decision made overnight. Instead, Part 6 of her story unfolded quietly, shaped by small moments, honest conversations, and choices that felt heavy even when they looked simple from the outside. After that private night in the empty restaurant, she could not go back to pretending music was just a memory. Something had reopened inside her, not painfully but firmly, like a door that would no longer stay shut. She returned to work the next day as usual. She tied her apron, checked her section, and greeted guests with the same calm professionalism. But now, when she walked past the piano, she no longer avoided it. She acknowledged it with a quick glance, almost like greeting an old friend she had not seen in years. The billionaire did not show up every day. In fact, there were long gaps when she did not see him at all. That was important. It gave her space to think without feeling watched or rushed. She needed that time. This was not about impressing anyone. It was about understanding herself. At home, she began to practice again in the only way she could. She did not own a piano. Buying one was not an option. Instead, she used what she had. She practiced finger movements on the table. She replayed pieces in her head. She listened carefully to music, breaking it down note by note, imagining how it would feel to play it. It surprised her how much her body remembered. Even without keys beneath her fingers, her hands moved with purpose. The discipline she once built had not vanished. It had simply been waiting for permission to return. Some nights, doubt crept in. She wondered what she was doing. She questioned whether this small spark meant anything real or if it was just nostalgia playing tricks on her. She reminded herself of bills, responsibilities, and the reality of her life. Music did not offer security. It never had. But then she would remember how calm she felt after playing in the empty restaurant. How complete, how honest. That feeling mattered. When the billionaire returned again, it was not planned. He came in on a quiet afternoon, earlier than usual. The restaurant was half full, sunlight filtering through the windows. She noticed him immediately but did not approach right away. Work came first. When she finally did, he greeted her warmly and asked how she had been. This time, her answer was different. Still polite, still brief, but lighter. He noticed. After placing his order, he said something unexpected. He asked if she had ever considered teaching music. The question caught her off guard. Teaching had never crossed her mind. Performing, yes, once upon a time, but teaching felt different, more grounded, more realistic. She told him she had never thought about it seriously. She did not have formal qualifications anymore. She had been out of practice for years. He listened, then said that qualifications mattered less than understanding. He said that people who had lived with something deeply often taught it best, because they knew not just how to do it but why it mattered. The idea stayed with her long after he left. That night, she searched online for local community centers, places that offered affordable classes, music programs, youth centers. She did not apply to anything. She only looked. She only read. Felt like standing at the edge of a river, unsure whether to step in. Days later, the restaurant manager approached her with a request. A small private event was coming up, a closed gathering. The organizer had asked if live piano music could be arranged, something simple and elegant. The regular pianist was unavailable. The manager asked if she would consider playing. Her first reaction was fear. This was different from an empty room, different from a spontaneous moment. This was planned, expected, real. She asked for time to think. That night was restless. She turned the idea over in her mind again and again. If she said no, life would continue exactly as it had. Safe, predictable. If she said yes, she risked failure, judgment, disappointment. But she also risked growth. She realized something important then. Fear had guided most of her choices for years. Not because she was weak, but because she had learned that stability mattered. Still, fear had quietly become a cage. The next day, she said yes. The event was small. Only a handful of guests. Soft lighting. Calm atmosphere. She practiced quietly at the restaurant after closing for several nights beforehand. Each session strengthened her confidence. Her mistakes grew fewer. Her touch grew surer. The billionaire did not attend the event. She did not know if that disappointed or relieved her. Perhaps both. When the night came, she dressed simply and sat at the piano with steady hands. She played background music, nothing flashy, nothing demanding attention. But it was good, clean, warm, controlled. No one applauded loudly. They did not need to. The organizer thanked the manager afterward and said the music had been perfect. Perfect. That word echoed in her mind as she walked home. The next week, the billionaire returned. He had heard about the event. Not from her, but from the manager. He congratulated her quietly. He did not act surprised. That mattered. They talked more openly then. Not about money or opportunity, but about choices. About timing. About how life sometimes forced people to pause their dreams, but not erase them. He shared a little of his own story. How success had not come easily. How he had walked away from things he loved because survival demanded it. How returning to those things later had been both healing and painful. That honesty changed the balance between them. It no longer felt like a powerful man observing a struggling waitress. It felt like two people who understood loss and rebuilding in different ways. One evening, he made an offer. Not a dramatic one. Not a promise of fame or wealth. He offered to help her find a small upright piano. A used one. Something simple. He said it would be a loan, not a gift. Something she could return if she chose to walk away again. She hesitated. Accepting help was difficult. It made her feel vulnerable. It raised questions about independence, pride, and obligation. But he was clear. There would be no expectations, no pressure, no deadlines. She took several days to think. In the end, she agreed. When the piano arrived at her apartment, it barely fit. The space felt smaller but also fuller. She sat in front of it for a long time before playing a single note. When she finally did, the sound was softer than the restaurant piano, but it was hers. Tears came then, quiet ones, not from sadness but release. She practiced every day after that, not for hours, just enough, slowly rebuilding strength, confidence, and trust in herself. Part 6 of her story was about foundation, about saying yes without knowing the full outcome, about allowing support without losing self-respect. about understanding that growth did not require a spotlight, only honesty. She was no longer just remembering who she had been. She was becoming her again. The truth did not come out in one clean moment. It surfaced slowly, through conversations that felt safe, through silences that invited honesty, and through memories she had kept locked away for years. Part 7 of her story was not about music alone. It was about the life behind it. As she practiced more at home, the piano began to reveal things she had tried to forget. Certain notes pulled emotions from deep places. Some melodies made her smile without effort. Others made her stop mid-song, her hands resting on the keys as memories flooded back. Music had always been her language, long before words felt strong enough. One evening, after a long shift at the restaurant, she sat at the piano but did not play. The room was quiet. The city noise outside felt distant. She stared at the keys and felt a weight in her chest. It was the kind of weight that came when something needed to be said, even if there was no one in the room to hear it. The next time the billionaire visited, she was different. Still polite, still calm, but more open. He noticed it immediately. He had learned to read people not by what they said, but by what they finally allowed themselves to show. They talked after her shift ended, sitting at a small table near the window. The restaurant was nearly empty. The lights were low. It felt private without being secret. She surprised herself by starting the conversation. She told him she had not always worked in restaurants. She told him about her childhood, growing up in a small home where money was tight but music filled the space. She spoke about the old piano she learned on, the hours she spent practicing while others played outside. Music had been her escape and her identity. She told him how teachers once believed in her, how they said she had something rare, how she dreamed of studying music seriously, of building a life around it. Her voice stayed steady as she spoke, but her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Then she told him what changed. A family crisis had come suddenly. Illness, debt, responsibilities she had not been ready for. Dreams were pushed aside, not because she wanted to give them up, but because someone had to be practical. Someone had to earn. Someone had to stay strong. She became that someone. Music slowly moved from the center of her life to the edges. Lessons stopped. Opportunities passed. What was meant to be temporary became permanent. 1 year turned into many. Eventually, it hurt less to say she used to play than to admit she still wanted to. He listened without interrupting. He did not look shocked or saddened. He simply listened, fully present, giving her the space to speak without fear of judgment. She told him about the nights she came home exhausted and still dreamed about music, about the guilt she felt for wanting something more when survival already took so much effort, about how she learned to silence that voice inside her because it made life harder. She admitted that playing in the restaurant had reopened wounds she thought were healed. It had reminded her not just of talent, but of loss. When she finished, she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she had avoided for years. She waited for a response she feared might feel like pity. Instead, he thanked her for trusting him. He told her that many people believed their story was defined by the moment they stepped away from their dreams. But in his experience, the real story was written by what they did when the door opened again. He shared more of his own past then, not details meant to impress, but moments of failure, fear, and regret. Times when he chose stability over passion. Times when he wondered who he might have been if circumstances were kinder. He told her that success often made people forget how fragile early dreams were, how easy it was to lose them, how brave it was to protect others at the cost of yourself. That conversation changed something between them. It was no longer about encouragement or opportunity. It was about truth. After that night, she began to speak more openly with herself too. She stopped pretending music was just a hobby. She admitted that it was part of her identity, even if she never stood on a stage. Accepting that truth brought both relief and fear. She started practicing pieces she had avoided before, songs tied to her early years. Some were rough, some were emotional, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. At the restaurant, word slowly spread. Guests began to ask if she was the one who played the piano that night. She never announced it. Others did. Some smiled when they recognized her. Some asked questions. She answered politely but kept boundaries. She did not want attention to replace intention. The manager noticed her growing confidence and offered her more opportunities to play during quiet evenings. Nothing formal. Nothing demanding. Just space. She accepted carefully, choosing nights when she felt ready. One evening, after she finished playing, a young guest approached her. Nervous. Unsure. The guest told her that watching her play had made them feel less afraid of trying something they loved. That comment stayed with her longer than applause ever could. She realized then that her story was not just about what she lost. It was about what she could still give. The billionaire watched these changes quietly. He did not push her forward. He did not suggest big plans. He understood that part 7 was about healing, not rushing. He did ask one important question. He asked her what success meant to her now. She thought about it for a long time before answering. She said success used to mean recognition, achievement, proof. Now it meant honesty. It meant waking up without regret. It meant letting music exist in her life without shame or fear. He smiled when she said that. He told her that was the strongest answer she could give. As weeks passed, she felt stronger. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because she was no longer divided inside. Her work mattered. Her music mattered. She mattered. Part 7 of her story was the unveiling. Not to the world, but to herself. She stopped hiding the truth of who she was and what she had been through. She stopped minimizing her journey to make others comfortable. She had survived. She had sacrificed. She had endured. And now, she was choosing herself again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but honestly. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a witness. And for the first time in a long while, her past no longer felt like a burden. Felt like proof of strength. The ending did not arrive as a dramatic scene or a sudden transformation. It arrived the way most real endings do, quietly, shaped by choices made day after day. Part 8 of her story was not about becoming someone new. It was about finally standing fully in who she already was. By now, the piano in her apartment no longer felt foreign or intimidating. It had become part of her daily rhythm. Some days she played only a few minutes. Other days she lost track of time completely. There was no pressure to be perfect. No audience to impress. The music existed because she allowed it to. At the restaurant, she was no longer just a waitress who sometimes played. She was someone with a presence. Guests noticed the calm confidence in her voice, the grounded way she moved through the room. She had not changed her job title, but she had changed how she carried herself. That made all the difference. The manager trusted her more now. He gave her freedom to play when the atmosphere felt right. Soft evenings, quiet dinners, moments when music could add warmth instead of noise. She chose pieces carefully, always mindful of the space and the people in it. She was no longer afraid of being seen. The billionaire continued to visit, but less often. That was intentional. He believed growth should never depend on constant support. When he did come, their conversations were lighter now. They talked about books, about ordinary frustrations, about small joys. Music was no longer the center of every discussion because it no longer needed permission to exist. One evening, after she finished playing, he asked her if she had ever considered recording her music. Not professionally, not for fame, just for herself. As a way to capture this chapter. The idea stayed with her. A few weeks later, she borrowed simple recording equipment from a friend. Nothing fancy, just enough to capture sound. She recorded late at night, when the city outside was quiet. She played pieces that reflected where she was now. Not the dreams of her past and not the pain either. Just honesty. Listening back to the recordings, she heard something new. Not perfection, but clarity. Her playing carried weight because it carried truth. That mattered more than technical brilliance. She shared one recording online, anonymously. No name, no backstory, just sound. She did not expect much. She almost forgot about it. Then messages began to appear. People wrote about how the music made them feel calm, how it reminded them of something they could not explain, how it helped them through a difficult evening. No one asked who she was. They only thanked her for the music. She cried quietly when she read those messages. Not because of validation, but because she finally understood something important. Music had never been about proving herself. It had always been about connection, about helping others feel less alone. That realization settled deeply inside her. Life did not suddenly become easy. She still worked long hours. She still worried about money. Some days were exhausting. But now, when things felt heavy, she had something steady to return to. A place inside herself that felt honest and whole. One night, after closing, she sat at the piano in the restaurant one last time before a scheduled renovation. The piano would be moved for a while. The space would change. She knew this chapter was ending. She played slowly, letting the room listen. The manager stood nearby, pretending to check something, but really just listening. A few staff members paused their work. No one spoke. When she finished, there was no applause. There did not need to be. She stood up, touched the edge of the piano lightly, and felt a sense of closure. Not loss, completion. Later that week, she made a decision that surprised even her. She reduced her work hours slightly and began offering beginner music lessons at a local community center. Just a few students. Just once a week. She did not advertise heavily. She did not promise anything grand. The first lesson was awkward. She was nervous. Teaching required a different kind of courage. But when she saw the way her students' eyes lit up after playing their first clean notes, she knew she had made the right choice. She told them something she wished someone had told her long ago. That progress mattered more than speed. That love for something was worth protecting. That stopping did not mean failing. The billionaire attended one of her small community recitals months later. He sat in the back, unnoticed, listening as her students played simple pieces with pride. When she glanced up and saw him, she smiled. Not because she needed approval, but because she felt gratitude. Afterward, he congratulated her. Not for success, but for balance. He told her she had done the hardest thing. She had chosen a life that felt true, not just impressive. As the year came to an end, she reflected on how far she had come. Not in distance, but in depth. She had stopped running from her story. She had stopped shrinking herself to fit into expectations. She was still a waitress. She was still a teacher. She was still a musician. None of those roles canceled the others. Part 8 of her story did not end with fame, wealth, or recognition. It ended with peace, with purpose, with a quiet confidence that did not need explanation. The billionaire went back to his world. The restaurant continued its rhythm. The piano found new rooms and new moments. And she continued forward, carrying her music with her. No longer hidden, no longer waiting. Some stories end with applause. Hers ended with something better. A life finally lived in harmony.